Yeah, the unfortunately those Lakers, Chaz, they just didn't.
You sound disappointed.
They just couldn't make it, man. They lost it. They got swept by the Denver Nuggets, which is such a tragedy, in its own right. Um, but coming out of that's not the word I should be using right now. But when the dust settled and the series is over, the Denver Nuggets had that 25 minutes of fame, and then LeBron came out with a cryptid, type message that he potentially could retire, and everybody was going to run with it, that narrative. What do you see with this Lakers team? Do you see LeBron retiring? What do you see? Who do you see coming back? How do you see them building to potentially get back to this situation next year?
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say, I don't know if you felt it was a tragedy. I think it was. I think you were excited. I think you were ready for the Lakers to get eliminated. Yeah, I think
No,
you were ready. I think you were ready to send that "it's a sweep" text. I think you were ready to go. I think you were looking forward to it all Monday.
I and I no, it broke my heart that the Lakers that they lost the way that they lost. Like I didn't even get to sleep, you know, the day that they lost. Like I was so hurt that I had some of the worst sleep. Like I don't even remember closing my eyes that night. Like I was just up in a dark room. Like I I I don't know like what this team could have done, to right the ship and get a W. But I was so heartbroken that they went out the way that they did. And like I just know as a Laker fan, it's just I don't know. I was heartbroken. Yeah, for sure.
I know as you being LeBron's biggest supporter, I think you were devastated to see him go out like that. Even though he played well, what he
Yeah.
had 40-point near triple double,
Mm-hmm.
highest scoring half in his playoff history, but they still get swept.
Yeah, he gave it all. He gave it all he had. In um that first half. He played every minute before seconds in that first half. Just incredible. 30 points in that half. He was unstoppable. He was going in the paint. He was knocking down his threes. He was streaking from three at the beginning of this series, but he was able to knock down when it mattered the most. And then he went to the locker room early, and he came back out in the second half, and it was just a brick city. He was just not able to make stuff and connect. He wasn't in the action the way he was in action in the second half. And unfortunately Anthony Davis couldn't pick up the slack. And as a LeBron supporter, as a LeBron fan, it was just so heartbroken that the season had to end like that. He gave it all he got. He's 38 years old. Like is he can't be the best player. Like Anthony Davis has to pick up that slack, and for him to have, he had 10 points, in the second half, like he gave it all he had. Like he ended up with 40. He had 30 in the first half, ended up with 40. So he only scored the 10 points in the third and fourth quarter. Like what more can you ask for, Like
Yeah. I mean, we're mainly joking around, but I think it was obvious that LeBron just ran out of gas in that second half.
yeah.
Like the age that he's at, the miles on him, and plus the foot injury that he's been dealing with since the end of the regular season.
Mhm.
I think he tried to come out there in vintage LeBron style and give it all he had
Just
in
couldn't.
an elimination game, and he pretty much only had a half in him. I mean, he played great in that half. He was solid in the second half. Making decisions. He was still making the right pass, still making the right play. But the scoring wasn't there. He wasn't able to get to the rim just because it looked like he was just gassed. I mean, there was multiple possessions where he was the last player to cross half court. There was a couple possessions in that fourth quarter where he didn't even touch the ball, not because his teammates weren't looking for him, but because he was pretty much standing on the outside of 3-point line trying to steal some, a few possessions to get some energy back. And he just didn't have enough left in the tank. Now, what you originally asked about, LeBron's future and the future of this franchise in general, it's hard to know where it goes from here. I mean, they have a couple guys, for contracts next year. LeBron, AD, they're going to be back. Presumably, if LeBron decides not to retire, that's obviously who the Lakers are going to build around. Beyond that, a ton of question marks. Do you try and bring Austin Reeves back, who's an unrestricted free agent and is probably going to get like a $20 million per
I
year?
said 20, yeah.
Yeah, but Austin Reeves, don't you think somebody will probably be willing to give him about 20-25 million for, 3 years or so? I don't know if the Lakers want to put all that on him. Rui Hachimura, who had a really good playoff run. He didn't play well in game 4 against Denver, but he was a pretty big factor in their second half resurgence. Do you try and bring him back? Jared Vanderbilt was a key player at times, but then he didn't play much in the Denver series. Is he somebody that you try and bring back? D'Angelo Russell, he was good in a couple of games against the Warriors, but there was a lot of times where he couldn't even be on the floor, and Darvin Ham was deciding to go with Dennis Schroeder instead. Do you bring Schroeder back? There's a ton of question marks with this team. So I think it's hard to see where it goes from here. It obviously starts with LeBron. Rob Pelinka is going to be talking to LeBron every day, trying to gauge where he's at, trying to test the waters, trying to see, within that quote that you mentioned earlier that LeBron said, he kind of has to reevaluate and see where he wants to go going forward. He hasn't thought about next season. He also said, that there was a potential that he wouldn't be ready for the start of the season. So I think there's a chance that maybe LeBron isn't ready to go in October, and instead he pushes that back to December or something, and maybe he can play, the rest of the year after that. It seems like there's a lot of question marks with LeBron, but then even once you figure out what LeBron's going to do, there's still a lot of other decisions to make. So I don't know. I could see this Lakers team being right back, competing for a conference finals berth, being a top 4 or 5 seed next year, or I could see them kind of falling off a cliff, and being right back in that like 8 to 10 range, which we saw them be for the last couple of years. That's where you think it's headed. So you think this is a team that's like a fringe playoff team next year?
I think all jokes aside, I think that what we're hearing right now is 3 to 4 years, 50 million for Austin Reeves. If the Lakers were to bring him back, that will be kind of the price tag. Now, the Lakers, I have no doubt in my mind that the Lakers will match that offer, depending on how much it is. Now, I do believe that he could potentially get more from another team. It's really going to depend on if the Lakers want him back, if he wants to come back. I believe they keep Rui. I think they build around those two guys. It's a travesty. It's really a travesty that LeBron James is the best player on his Los Angeles Lakers team. It should 100% be Anthony Davis. That's who you should be building around. But Anthony Davis, he hasn't taken that mantle yet. He's not that guy as of now. So they have to continue to build around LeBron James. I think that there's been so much that there's this hypothetical that's out there right now that if you're LeBron James, do you take next year off and come back for the following year to play with your son? There's so much that he's got the narrative. He's changed the narrative. It's no longer on Denver Nuggets. It's on what is LeBron thinking? What LeBron possibly could do? What are all the situations and the scenarios where we can see what LeBron do? But I do think that this Laker team will be better starting off than they were at the beginning of the year. I think they'll be better next year for sure. But I don't see this team getting back to the conference finals next year, if they can't build around Anthony Davis and LeBron James the way that they are now. D'Angelo Russell, one of the biggest things that was talked about and discussed, and, is that, it's essentially if you bitched him, you lose him. And that was being reported all throughout that series when he was playing bad, is that if you put him on the bench, you're more likely going to lose him in free agency. Darvin Ham finally sat him. And I don't expect him to be back on the team. And I fully expect them to have to, in some form or fashion, revamp their roster the way that they did in trade deadline. I don't know if they bring somebody like a Vanderbilt back. I don't know if they keep Beasley. I just don't know what this team looks like. I mean, they picked Tristan Thompson off of ESPN set, like 6 weeks before the season was over. So it was like, they I don't know where this team goes from here. But the teams are all just getting better. The Warriors, you have to believe that they're going to figure out the issues that they have internally. The Mavericks, are they going to keep Kyrie? Kyrie is a big factor with this Los Angeles Lakers team. Everything's going on. Do they bring in Kyrie Irving? That stirs the pot tremendously. I don't know. It's been so much speculation that he would come into the Lakers. And if you come to the Lakers, your Austin Reeves is gone, Rui Hachimura is gone. So you have to. Those are the decisions that the Los Angeles Lakers are gonna have to make come the season. And then to your point, Chaz, if they do have someone like Kyrie Irving, LeBron potentially can miss up until December and still be in playoff contention when he gets back. And then will a fresh LeBron, you got LeBron, Kyrie, and Anthony Davis going into All-Star weekend, the All-Star break. And you could potentially continue to ramp it up. Obviously, a little before that, in the beginning of the new year in January, now you can start ramping it up and winning those games and, jockeying for playoff position. So it's going to be interesting to see what this team do in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think Kyrie is definitely a player that we have to mention in that, obviously being tied to LeBron, they tried to make a run for him at the trade deadline, weren't able to.
Mhm.
And then with him being obviously an upcoming free agent, he could be in the mix for them to sign. They don't have a lot of cap space. They'd probably have to end up being a sign and trade. But if that's what Kyrie decided to happen, I feel like the Lakers would probably go for it.
Do you do that? Do you sign Kyrie and knowing that you have to give up Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and half of potentially good pieces that you have?
I don't think I do. I think they're a better team if they just have really good role players, if they have more cap space to use on, the sixth and seventh man instead of putting it all on the top three guys. I mean, if you have AD, LeBron, and Kyrie, that's pretty much all your cap space is going towards them three. I think that they actually showed down the stretch since they got rid of Russell Westbrook that they are a better team when they have guys contributing off the bench, when they have a little more flexibility. You can bring in a guy like Lonnie Walker if he's playing well. If he's not playing well, you can lean on Austin Reeves. Same thing with D'Angelo Russell and Dennis Schroeder. It was kind of more like whoever's playing well, whoever fits the matchup more. Same thing with Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura. Vanderbilt played a really key role in the Golden State series, but then he didn't play much in the other two series where
Mhm.
Rui was really good against Memphis and Denver. So I think they're a better team when they have that flexibility. But it is really hard to turn down Kyrie because you have a three-headed monster like that, and all of a sudden it does make you one of the most dangerous offensive teams in the league.
I think one of the best examples to use for this is the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix Suns has two of the best offensive players to ever dribble basketball, and they got annihilated because they don't have depth and they don't have a bench. So you're going to have to be that whole quote that LeBron said a couple years ago, we're top heavy as shit. That's going to be reincarnated with the Los Angeles Lakers. You're going to be top heavy as shit, and
Yep.
you're not going to have no bench, no depth. So I don't know. I'm with you. I don't make it, and I know it's up. It's I don't know. I don't even know it's a hot take. We're saying this. I don't make that. I don't make that trade. I think the Lakers could be better building around Anthony Davis and LeBron with Rui, with Austin Reeves. But I like that better than scrapping them and placing them with Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I think you're
You're
right.
killing my cap space, essentially.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no doubt that that's a really enticing thing to do. We saw Kyrie at game four. There's been a lot of discussions, over the last couple of days about is that something that they should do? We're leaning towards no, but I could see them doing it. I could
Yeah.
see Rob Pelinka just being like, this is
All
LeBron's
out.
guy. We bring him in. Maybe we have a 2-year window where we really go after it. We can get a couple guys to sign, mid-level deals, couple veterans to come in, and maybe they can fill out the bench. But I don't think that's the decision. I don't think that's the right way to go.
Are they favorite in the Western Conference if that happened?
No,
No,
I don't think so.
with Kyrie.
I don't think so. I don't think that team is better than Denver. And, like you mentioned earlier, you also talk about, the Warriors likely being reloaded. And then you add in the Phoenix Suns are probably going to have a better bench next year. They're probably going to be a top 4 seed in the
I,
West.
I think because Denver had to go through that 1 year where they had to go through that 1 year with Kevin Durant with a depleted bench. Now they have the opportunity. They're going to probably move off Ayton in the off season, and then they're going to be able to unload some other players to bring in an actual bench. I think they just have to go through that 1 year where they were top heavy as bleep. When they make it's typically when somebody make a team make a big move like that, when they're bringing in the superstar, you're typically going to have a 1 year whether you guys are really good to win a championship with that top heavy team, or you struggle because you don't have any bench. So Phoenix, because of that trade, they were top heavy. They just didn't have enough to win a title. Now coming back, Suns are going to have a complete team. They're going to get rid of Ayton probably. He's going to free up cap space. They're going to be able to sign players. So Phoenix, they're probably going to let Chris Paul walk. So Phoenix is going to have an opportunity to build, an actual team around Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And I don't know that Lakers team is better than that. Just share on Booker and KD alone. I don't know. So
Yeah, I agree with you. While we're talking about a couple other teams, I got a couple questions for you. You want me to start a new video or just keep it rolling?
yeah, let's keep rolling.
Okay, so obviously these teams have been eliminated now for a few weeks, but you just mentioned the Suns likely getting rid of Aiden. Where does this team go from here? They fired Monty Williams after the season, second straight embarrassing loss to finish the playoffs, so they decided to move on from him. It sounds like the finalists, I believe, were Nick Nurse, Kevin Young, who's a Suns assistant, the Kings assistant, I forget his name, and then also Doc Rivers. I think that was the 4 that I heard. So who do you think they'd hire as a coach? And then do you think that's a team that can get to the finals next year?
I think I don't even know how popular this is, but I think Nick Nurse is probably their option.
Mhm.
Championship proven coach recently, 2019. He's a good scheme, X's and O's coach. I think he makes in a current situation, he makes the best situations and decisions. I think he know how to coach superstars when he has them. He had Kawhi Leonard. He was able to coach him. Now it's going to be a little different because Kawhi was low managing, but when Kawhi played in the playoffs, I think he did a real good job putting him in position to be successful. So I think it boils down to Nick Nurse and Doc Rivers. If I had to choose, I'd probably say Nick Nurse. I think DeAndre Ayton is off this team. I think Chris Paul potentially could be off this team as well. I think you build around Durant and Book. I think you need defense. Defense is going to be your main priority here. You're going to want to get someone kind of a 3D guy as well. I think you need a sharpshooter on this team, a guy that is really good, has a high percentage at shooting threes. But I think their main thing is going to be to fill up that bench and get a defensive presence on that team. Because Devin Booker, Kevin Durant can take you far offensively, but they're going to need help when they need the rest, and they're going to need people to help them on the defensive end because both of them kind of lack that other side of the ball. So defense, Nick Nurse, and load your bench up. Trade DeAndre Ayton, and let Chris Paul walk.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good scenario for them. That would probably be best case scenario for the offseason, if that's what we're able to happen. I think you're probably right that Aiden's not on that team. Nick Nurse, it seems like a few of these teams are going after him. The Bucks are as well. So whoever his landing spot is could potentially, have a pretty big shift on who wins a championship potentially next season.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do think this team is going to be in a better place to win next season. It just seemed like with such late trade in the season, Kevin Durant not being healthy, and then the lack of depth that we've talked about for the last few months, there was pretty much no way that they were going to win a championship this year. So do you see them being a championship contender next year?
I think they could be a top 5 seed in the Western Conference.
Okay.
I don't have them over Denver. I don't have them over Golden State. I don't have them over. I put them in that same conversation with the Mavericks, them as well. And kind of in that tier. I think Denver and Golden State, depending on what happens, are I think are the two favorites to come out of the conference. The Lakers can shake something up if they pull off that Kyrie Irving, depending on what they do. But I'm talking about a team that's presently constructed now, and if they come back with their same type of roster, I think I will have to favorite Denver and have Golden State at 2. But I think major changes is probably coming to Golden State.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to ask you about now. So, obviously, they go through the turmoil last season, in the preseason where Draymond punches Jordan Poole. It seemed like that kind of had a factor throughout the season. And then coming to the end of the season, Andrew Wiggins is not there for a few months. So he's coming back fresh, to start the playoffs, which is not an easy task. And then, in the playoffs, they got outplayed by the Lakers. I think they got kind of bullied a little bit. It seemed like the Lakers were just more a physical team, and that was the deciding factor throughout the series. Jordan Poole really struggled in that series. Klay Thompson really struggled in the last 3 games. Draymond was effective at times, not as much at other times. Guys like Kevon Looney was really important in the Sacramento series, but then AD was no match for him, in that Lakers series. So where do you see the Warriors going? You're saying that you think they're going to be a top 2 seed and presumably a team competing for a championship next season. Is that with changes? Do you think they get rid of Jordan Poole? Do you think they make any like significant changes?
I think the core stays. I think you can't run it back with Jordan Poole and Draymond on the same team.
Okay.
I believe one of them has to go. I believe Jordan Poole. I believe he has more value than a Draymond Green will have in the open market. I always say this. I said Draymond is tailor made for Golden State. If you put him on another team, he's not as effective as he is on Golden State because he is the system of Golden State. So the way that they play him and Steph with the pick and roll is tailor made for his ability. So Draymond getting 30 million for the Warriors is absolutely deserved. But giving him 30 million on a team like the Lakers, you might be overpaying him because his value isn't the same on the Lakers that is of the Warriors, if that makes sense. So I think you have to keep a person like that on your team. I believe if the Warriors don't have Draymond, I don't think they're a championship team because Draymond and Steph is the system of Golden State. I do think, you get Klay, you keep Klay, but there's also been talk of Klay, the Warriors wanting him to take a pay cut. So I don't know how that ends. I don't know if Klay does it. I will assume that he might consider it, but if you keep the big 3 intact, I think you can get valuable pieces for Jordan Poole. He's making 128 over. I think he has a 4 or 5 year contract. He's due for a pay raise. He's going to be making $30+ million if he stays on the Golden State Warriors next season. I'm keeping Wiggins. I'm keeping GP2. I'm keeping Dante DiVincenzo. So those are my keeps. So now you get into Kuminga. Kuminga, I think he has value around this league. There's been talks that he has value around this league. There's also been him complaining that he's not getting enough time with the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors are in a situation where because their big 3 is still up and running around, and they still have they're in a window. Because I don't think he's ready for that style of basketball in the playoffs, I don't think he's going to see any run in the near future, especially depending on who they play. So I think for the Warriors' sake, and because I think it would be better for him, I believe the Warriors should move off of Kuminga. Now, if you're asking me where that is, I think Kerr stays. I think that's automatic. You keep your big 3. You keep Dante DiVincenzo, you keep Wiggins, and then you keep GP2. The team that I have my eyes on, and I've been having my eyes on this team for 2 years now, the Toronto Raptors. The Warriors have been having their eyes on OG Anunoby for 3 years now. If the Warriors can somehow get OG Anunoby, and you're giving up if they can pull off Wiggins and Kaminga in pieces, and somehow you can convince Toronto to give you OG Anunoby, I believe that make the Warriors prohibitive favorites to win it all.
You
I
would give
believe,
up Wiggins to get Anunoby?
huh?
You would give up Wiggins to get him?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kaminga in
Okay.
pieces. In pieces. It's hard because you have to make the money work. OG Anunoby makes a little less than Jordan Poole, so you have to put in other pieces to make the money work. I believe that Poole can be an asset to Toronto. I believe Anunoby could be a valuable asset to us. It goes along with him and Wiggins. OG Anunoby is a two-way player. He can guard 1 through 5. I like that pairing with Andrew Wiggins. He could pick up some of Klay Thompson's slack because Klay Thompson's not the defender he used to be. And Klay Thompson, if he doesn't need to play, he doesn't need to play all games. If that's the case, he can have his stretches where he's sitting out. I think OG Anunoby is the key to the Warriors winning another a championship. And I've been feeling that way for 3 years now, but they haven't recently. They didn't pull the trigger back then when he was available. Now that he's not available and still under contract now, I think because Toronto just fired their coach, Toronto will probably be looking to shop people around. And if they can get their hands on OG and Anunoby, I think that's the player. See, sometimes for great teams, it's not about superstars.
Yeah.
If you can get someone like OG and Anunoby on the team, I think that changes the Warriors. It changes the outlook on the league drastically. I think that pairing, the big three with Wiggins, with OG and Anunoby, is a recipe for another championship run for the Warriors.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And this is obviously a turning point with the Warriors. Steph still being at the peak of his powers, one of the best players in the league. I think you have to try and make a championship contender every season if it's possible. Jordan Poole being your second highest paid player and he's pretty much unplayable
Yeah.
in that Lakers series is not a good look. So I agree with you. I think they're going to try and move off of him this summer. We'll see if they are able to find a suitor. But there are a lot of question marks because Draymond, also has a potential to leave this summer if he would like to. And then Bob Myers, is at the end of his contract. Is he going to be back next year? So there's a lot of question marks for this team. But
I
if
think
any
Myers walks. I think Myers is gone.
gone,
I think
okay,
Myers is gone. I think Bob Myers is gone. I think the Warriors have molded and groomed the predecessor under Bob Myers to take him once it's over. So he's been learning from Myers since day one. I believe they are content with Myers leaving because it's a money grab for him, and I don't blame him. Although I'm hearing the Warriors have offered him a lucrative contract. But I'm pretty sure there's a team out there that can pay him more. So I believe Bob Myers is gone. With the whole Draymond Green contract situation, I think the Warriors pay him. I think because he wants $30 million, I give him $30 million because Draymond value to the Warriors can't be understated. As I said, to another team, he might not be worth $30 million. To
mhm,
the Warriors, he's worth the 30 million. So because I think it's either him or Poole, I don't think there's no scenario where the Warriors bring both of them back and could compete for a title. I think it's the ship has sunk with those two. And it brought the team down, as they all said in their post press conference.
mhm.
That was an issue in the locker room. It never seemed right. I don't think it can ever be the same. Like that changed the dynamic of their relationship in that locker room that season. If that team comes back constructed, I don't see how that team wins a championship. It's always there, you
Mhm.
know. So one of them has to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's going to end up happening. I got to get going pretty soon, so we can hit these last two teams real quick.
Yep.
But I wanted to get your take on the Milwaukee Bucks. They're like I mentioned, another team that's looking for a head coach after they fired Mike Budenholzer. It looks like they're going after Nick Nurse as well. Team that was 58-24, number one seed in the Eastern Conference, arguably the best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo, and you get upset in the first round, and all of a sudden there's a lot of question marks for a team that a few months ago was one of the most stable teams in the league. Where do they go from here? Do they re-sign Chris Middleton? Are they a championship contender next season?
I think Chris Middleton's best is behind him. And it's not his fault, it's the injuries.
Mhm.
So I don't think I think we've seen the best of Chris Middleton. I don't think he can get back to the player that he was. I think you can make an argument he was a top 25, 30 player in the league when he was playing in his prime. Well, he's in his prime, but playing at his best basketball when he was not injured. So Drew Holiday is talking about retirement in a couple of years. So the Milwaukee Bucks has a lot of questions, and they get rid of their coach. I don't know who you bring in. I mean, I think anything for Giannis will be a play and play for anybody, for a coach. Essentially, I don't know how long Giannis stays until he decides that he no longer wants to be in Milwaukee anymore. But I think because he's so loved and he's so beloved in the NBA that he doesn't want to be another Kevin Durant. But I do feel like if Giannis wants to win another title, he has to leave Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee's done winning a title. They could be the best in the conference, the number one seed. But I don't think because unless you make substantial moves in the offseason and you get Chris Middleton's your second best player. I think Chris Middleton easily needs to be your third. So if you can get someone else a little better than Chris Middleton, maybe things can change. But I just don't see who wants to come to Milwaukee willingly without being traded to Milwaukee. I don't see it.
Yeah, and then another one of those Eastern Conference teams that fell short of expectations was the Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah, just a few weeks ago, it looked like they were going to be playing in the conference finals. They lose game 6 and game 7 to the Celtics. Doc Rivers is fired. James Harden is, potentially going to leave in free agency.
Tobias Harris over me.
Yeah. Yeah, this team doesn't exactly have a good track record of making decisions over the last, 5 or 6 years. Where do you think this team goes from here?
I think James goes back to Houston, which best of luck to him. I think James his best is behind him anyway, so I don't think it. Houston is a young team. I wonder what's going to happen when he goes to that team and then Udoka having played defense because Harden don't like to play defense. So that's going to be very interesting to see. You go into a defensive minded coach team and you don't like to play defense. That's going to be interesting. But I don't know. I think this team. I don't want to keep harping and saying the same thing. Like I don't know the ceiling of this team. I think they reached it. And I think that to me, apparently all of the teams have reached a ceiling to me, but I don't know if they have what it in them to reach that level of again to a finals. Well, I shouldn't say that because every team has a different level that they've reached. Like I'm saying that the Celtics can get to the finals, but I don't think they can win it. I'm saying Philadelphia, I don't even think they can get to a finals. Like, so this is when you look back and say, was the process a failure? All those years, all those draft picks, getting all those players, I can't help but to think if they had Jason Tatum on their team, I think they would have been champions by now because they passed up Jason Tatum to draft Markelle Fultz. That's
It definitely didn't sound as bad back then as it does now.
that probably go down as one of the biggest. That's crazy, but I don't know. Where this Philadelphia team goes. Joel Embiid, obviously, he still has the issues, the injury issues. I don't know. I very believe he could be the best part of the championship team if he's healthy. It's just trying to get the pieces around him to fit. I think this was an opportunity for them to beat that Celtics team. I believe, a lot of people saying I was having an argument with my sister, and she was like, this team wasn't good. And I'm like, why weren't they? They were a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. Like, I'm not saying they had to be better than Boston, but I'm saying you had them dead to right. You had them dead to right, and it couldn't get it done in the game 6. You can't tell me that you weren't on par with this team when you had them on the brink of elimination. You can't tell me that. So I think they were good enough. A lot of people saying they weren't good enough to win. They were good enough to win.
Yeah.
They were good enough to win. They were good enough to beat Boston, for sure. So I don't know. I'm curious to think, where do you think they go? Because I think they've reached their max.
I think you're probably right. I mean, this is a franchise that hasn't been to the conference finals in over 20 years. and it seems like they're gonna kind of stay right in that mix where they're a really good team, probably 50 wins a year, second round playoff team, but it's hard to see them taking that next step. That's going to depend on a lot, who they replace Harden with if he does leave. It's also going to depend on who they replace Doc Rivers with.
Mhm.
Tyrese Maxey continue to become a better player. Can Joel Embiid become better, even though he is one of the best players in the league? He is the reigning MVP. He still has room for improvement. He's one of those players where they aren't as good in the playoffs as they are the regular season. And you want him to at least be on par with his regular season ability. But he wasn't great in the playoffs. Part of that was injury. And there were other factors in that. But he had moments in that Boston series where he could have stepped up and proved that he was the best player on the court. And he didn't do that in game 6 or game 7. So it's hard to really say that this franchise is going to be able to do something that we haven't seen them do in 20 years. I think they'll be a good team next year. I don't see them being a finals contender though.
Do you think they're still in top 4 in the Eastern Conference?
I do. I think right now I would have them in that conversation. But you never know. Like if they get rid of if Harden leaves and they make one deal and it doesn't really help and maybe they hire somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience, I could see them dropping off a little bit too.
Yeah, I just want to say something that we said way early in the show that you said Jamal Murray is better than Donovan Mitchell. Just to let you know.
Oh, let's have that
Oh,
conversation with Tunde next week.
okay. I don't think that's a hot take.
You don't think so? I
No,
think I think people would say Donovan's like a top 15 player and Murray's probably like a top 30. You
Donovan Mitchell's not top 15.
don't think so?
No,
Let's have this conversation next week.
absolutely. Let's
That's a
do
good
it.
conversation because that kind of was birthed in the bubble when we saw those guys.
Are we bringing out the top? Are we bringing out the rankings again? Are we bringing about the rankings again?
Hey, during the off season, we're gonna have to do a lot of ranking stuff. We should break down, all the best guards, best forwards, top 25 players in the league. I feel like we should get into all that.
You know what we should do? It's gonna take a while, but I really want to do it. I want to do a top 100 list.
Oh, I would love that.
I want to do a top 100 list because I'm very curious to see um who's in that 50 range, 30 range, 20 range. I would love to see that and how that's changed, not saying it because in the regular season, we know it's not consistent. It goes up and down where we're talking about best players. But that top 50, that top 100, like that's like who you think all-time great is. So
Mhm.
like I think we should definitely do a top 100 list at some point in time.
Yeah, we should work on that during the off season.
Yeah. And kind of have like 25, like a window of 25, next episode do 25, 25, kind of like a countdown, and then you do your top 10, and then you do your top 5. Like, oh yeah, we got to plan that for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Anything else from you?
You want to wrap it up?
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Spoken Truth. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to the pod. Follow me on Instagram at Daddy Murphy Jr. 1.
Yeah, you can follow me on socials at Chaz_post23.
All right, and we will be back during the 2023 NBA Finals. Let's go.
Yep, can't wait.